So I think my screen is being shared. Please wait hold on a second. So today, as I introduced, I'm going to uh, uh, provide an introduction to the Article 9 of Minamata Convention on Mercury, which control the releases of mercury to land and water. Uh, so the first part of my presentation is about how the Minamata Convention control mercury releases to land and water. And I will start with this graphic, which describes the life cycle of mercury, and showing that the Minamata Convention mercury controls the whole life cycle of mercury from its production and use, emissions, releases, and waste management and contaminated sites. And so today we are speaking about the mercury releases to land and water. And please note that in Minamata Convention, we have a bit of special usage of terms emissions and releases. And in that convention, emissions of mercury means the emission to air, and the releases of mercury means releases to land and water. So the Minamata Convention consists of different kinds of articles, and the control measures are described in articles from Article 3 to Article 12, and the article Article 8 addresses the emissions, Article 9 addresses releases. And also there are provisions of controlling life cycle mercury that is intentionally used from the mining and then the use and uh, 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 use in products, use in processes, and use in gold mining. So this picture was taken from the Global Mercury Assessment of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and the mercury is controlled on the Minamata Convention because it is a global pollutant which is emitted to air and travels long distance and accumulate in in fish and other living organisms and persist in the environment and taken up by by humans and causes the health damage and also the environmental damage. The major global pollution pathway is through air, but some mercury released directly into land and water. The exact estimation of the releases of mercury to land and water is very difficult, and really it is really difficult to define which should be estimated, which of the mercury releases should be estimated to land and water. For example, if you if mercury is contained in waste and landfilled in the technically controlled landfill site, it is not regarded as the releases to land because it is under control. But if the waste containing mercury is dumped to the environment, then it will be regarded as releases to land. So exact amount is very difficult to estimate, but the Minamata Convention tries to control the whole life cycle and whole fate of mercury, including the emissions to air and releases to land and water. So throughout this life cycle, from Article 3 to Article 12, addresses these life cycle stages, and different guidance documents have been developed by the conference of the parties. With regard to the emissions to air, the guidance on the best available technology and best environment practice, and also inventory, emission inventory was adopted at COP1 in 2017. For releases, it took a bit of time, and the inventory guidance was adopted at COP4 or in 2022, but BEP guidance was adopted at COP5 in 2023. So I will look specifically at how the what Article 9 says about the obligations of the parties to control the mercury releases. Firstly, Article 9 is about releases of mercury and mercury compounds to land and water. As I said, the emission to air is controlled by Article 8. The Article 9 addresses relevant point sources, not addressed in other provisions. So the keyword here is there are two keywords. One is point sources. So the Article 9 is about point sources such as the factory or waste incineration site and so on. And it doesn't cover the mercury from contaminated sites or the use in artisanal small-scale gold mining and so on. And the second keyword is not addressed in other provisions. So for example, as I said, the artisanal small-scale gold mining, ASGM, is controlled under Article 7, and also the releases from the industrial processes that uses mercury, such as the chloralkali industry, is addressed under Article 5. So it is not controlled under Article 9. And this it is in contrast with Article 8, the mercury emissions, as you saw in the diagram. The emission to air is the major environmental pathway of mercury, global mercury pollution, and Article 8 controls mercury emissions from point sources listed in Annex D. There are 5 sources: coal, non-ferrous metals, waste incineration, and cement. So the Article 8 lists the industrial sectors that are controlled under the article, but Article 9 is about under Article 9, the parties are to identify relevant sources. So this is stipulated in Article 9, paragraph 3. The first obligation for parties is to identify relevant point source categories. And in the national reporting under the Minamata Convention, we asked the question: are there within the party's territory relevant sources of releases as defined in paragraph 9? And more than half parties responded no. So for those parties, there's no further obligation under Article 9 of the convention. And if party it identifies that there are relevant point sources, then a party with relevant point sources shall take measures to control releases. And the Article 9, paragraph 4 says that in taking those measures, parties may prepare a national plan. And there's a requirement about when to submit national plan, and the national plan may be a part of a larger national implementation plan. So this is quite similar to what Article 8 says about the mercury emissions. And then the measures that parties are to take to control releases may include will include one or more of the following. So there are four methods or ways to address the mercury releases. One is the release limit values, such as the limit value of certain ppm of industrial effluent. And the second option is to make use of the best available techniques and best environmental practice. But BEP, I'm going to speak about this further. And the third option is a multi-pollutant control strategy. So the release control not only on mercury, but as a part of the control of industrial wastewater, including the other metals or the organic pollutants and so on. And number four are the alternative measures. So any other measures that parties deems appropriate. And then parties with relevant sources shall establish as soon as practicable and no later than 5 years after the entry into force, establish a inventory of releases. And in the national reporting, the 42 parties responded, yes, we developed release inventories. And lastly, the parties have obligations to report on the measures taken and also the effectiveness of such measures. And the first full national report was already submitted by 2021. And the next report, including these measures on Article 9, is due by December next year. So I think I will stop here now and see whether Bianca is online.
Yes, I'm online.
Okay, so may I turn to you? I will share my screen. Okay. Over to you, Bianca.
Thank you very much, Zaku. And good afternoon, good day, colleagues. As already introduced, my name is Bianca Dlamini, originally from Eswatini, but currently based in South Africa at the Africa Institute offices. May I present to you the work of the Technical Expert Group on Mercury Releases. So this group was established by the decision of COP2 in 2018. The group had a general mandate to work on the two kinds of guidance mentioned in Article 9 of the Convention, namely the guidance on mercury release inventories, and the guidance on best available techniques and best environmental practices to control mercury releases. The first task was to develop a list of relevant point source categories. The COP had also requested the group to draft a roadmap to develop guidance on release inventories. The work on the BEP guidance was deferred to until the inventory guidance was completed. The composition of the group. The group consisted of members nominated by parties. Each of the 5 UN regions was requested to nominate 5 members. Initially, the group consisted of 22 members. Some regions were not able to nominate all 5 members. As the group worked for the 5 years, some experts retired or left the positions, and when the group completed the work, it had 15 members altogether. I had the honor of co-chairing the group since its establishment, and I'm grateful to my former co-chairs, Mr. Greg Helms of the United States, who co-chaired the group until COP4, but retired from the government later on. Mr. Christian Brito of Chile co-chaired after COP4, but he also left the position before COP5. The work of the group was also supported by observers from intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations, as listed. Between COP2 and COP3, the group had 4 online meetings and reviewed the information on possible point source categories submitted by 7 parties and 2 stakeholders. The group submitted a report to COP3 containing a draft roadmap for developing inventory guidance and a preliminary list of potentially relevant point source categories. Between COP3 and COP4, the group had 13 online meetings and developed a draft inventory guidance, including a list of potentially relevant point source categories and a draft roadmap for developing the BEP guidance. I am very grateful for all the input received from parties and all stakeholders. In my last slide, the work of the group after COP4 to develop the BEP guidance is presented. COP4 adopted the roadmap to develop the BEP guidance as the group had proposed. The roadmap included an invitation to parties and stakeholders to submit information on national regulations and industry practice and commenting on the draft guidance before submission to the COP. Since the work of the group shifted from the release inventory to control technologies, parties were also invited to review the nomination of experts and replace as appropriate. The group worked electronically as we had done before, and the group had 7 online meetings. 7 parties and 1 stakeholder submitted information on national regulations and industry practice for controlling mercury releases. The work of the group was supported by Ms. Natalia Efros, who was a consultant hired by the Secretariat. The group developed a draft guidance and compiled supporting information based on the submissions and information collected by the consultant. The draft guidance was posted on the website in December 2022 for commenting for 8 weeks. Comments were received from 4 parties and 7 stakeholders. The group reviewed the submitted comments and revised the draft guidance, which was submitted to COP5. I am glad that the group of the technical experts had been able to complete the mandate from the COP, and I am very thankful for the hard work and contribution by members and observers and useful information that we received from parties and stakeholders. May I also take this opportunity to also thank the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention for their excellent coordination and the support that was provided to us as we worked on this mandate. I now turn over to Secretariat, who will then give us the adopted guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bianca, for the presentation and for your hard work for 5 years leading the group of technical experts. So I'm now presenting the BAT-PEP guidance that was adopted by the COP5. And before doing that, I like to show you how the BAT-PEP, best available techniques and best available practice are defined in Article 2 of the convention. I'm not reading all the text, but I'd like to note that what the word available is meant to refer to the also the economical and technical viability that may be different from party to party. So the convention, Article 9 of the convention says that COP shall adopt two kinds of guidance. One is BAT-PEP guidance, and the second is the inventory guidance. And the decision MC5/9 adopted the guidance and invited parties with relevant sources to take into account the guidance when taking measures. So this is what COP requested to the parties to do. So the list of potential relevant source of releases was already agreed at COP4 or as part of the inventory guidance. And this is this list is in line with the mercury inventory guidance, which I will refer to later. So the Article D emission sources such as coal combustion and the metal production, cement are included, and also the production of mercury-added products and waste incineration, wastewater treatment system, and waste deposition site are also included as potential relevant sources of releases. And note that this is a potential relevant source categories, and it is up to the parties to identify point source categories and individual point sources. But web guidance is available from the website, and this presentation will be shared after this session. The web guidance contains 5 chapters from the introduction and consideration in the selection of best web, and then the section 3 describes the common techniques for control releases, such as the removal of solid content, precipitation, recovery of mercury ion exchange or adsorption, and so on. And chapter 4 explains specific techniques for selected specific source categories, and the chapter 5 addresses the monitoring of mercury releases. Also, I like to mention the inventory guidance that was adopted at COP4. Firstly, the guidance follows the structure of the emissions guidance, emissions inventory guidance under Article 8, and it describes the general steps and procedures to establish release inventory. And then also the guidance mentions pollutant release and transfer register (PRTR) as information source for mercury release inventories, and the UNEP inventory toolkit could as a good source of information about the establishing the mercury release inventories under Article 9. So, in summary, the parties are to uh, identify relevant point sources and take measures to control mercury releases from relevant point sources, develop a national plan, which is optional, develop and maintain inventories of releases, and report on measures taken. The parties with relevant sources of mercury releases are to take account of the guidance when taking measures to control release of mercury. And also, the parties may wish to share information on controlling mercury releases with other parties through the Secretariat. So, the following two slides are some general information from the Secretariat. We have developed the capacity building tools, including the Minamata tools and the training modules, and we are also working on the with the World Customs Organization for custom officers training. And also, we work with other multilateral environmental agreements on the through the project called Informe. And also, my last slide is about the one of the financial mechanism of the Minamata Convention, which is Specific International Program (SIP), and there have been 3 rounds of project funding, and the yellow highlighted are projects that include Article 9 in their objectives. The 4th round application was closed this summer, and we are in the process of selecting the projects to be funded. So I think this is my presentation, and if you have any question, please put that in the chat. Thank you very much. And then I would like to invite 2 experts to speak about the specific techniques in specific industry sectors. And first, I would like to invite Dr. Leslie Ross, the co-chair, co-lead of the Global Mercury Partnership Coal Area. Leslie, floor is yours.
Thank you, Isaku. I'm hoping you can share my slides now.
Yes, it's been shared in a moment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I am speaking on behalf of the Coal Partnership Area, where I am co-lead in conjunction with Dr. Peter Nelson, Professor Peter Nelson from Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. Commonly, I talk about coal combustion emissions to the air under Article 8, but of course this is Article 9 and we want to talk about land and water. Next slide, please. So coal is responsible for around 20-21% of the global mercury emissions to air. And of course, the aim of the Coal Partnership Area is to reduce these emissions into the air, but mercury is an element. It doesn't magically disappear once we capture it. If it's not in the air, it's now in the solid or liquid medium. So next slide, please. And the next one after that, thank you. So here is a schematic of the average coal-fired power plant. The coal will be in the boiler there, it will be combusted, and steam generated from the hot water at the top of the boiler goes to turn the turbine, and that's how we create electricity. And of course, that coal is now combusted and it has released a lot of gas. This is the flue gas, which then flows through the remainder of the plant, which is mainly emission control technologies. So in some situations, it may pass through an SCR, which is a catalyst to reduce NOx emissions, and that can help oxidize mercury to help it capture. It will then pass through a particulate control device, either an ESP, that's an electric static precipitator, or a baghouse, which is a filter type process. In either situation, the mercury can be captured into the solid form, so it will come out as a fly ash, solid material. And then if the plant has one, it would pass, the flue gas would pass through an FGD, a flue gas desulfurization system, to reduce the sulfur emissions to air. Now, these systems are very good at also capturing soluble oxidized mercury, in which case the mercury would be captured with the sulfur in the solid gypsum material. All the processed water would be treated to ensure that the sulfur and the mercury ends up in the solid gypsum material. So when you look at a coal-fired power plant, the mercury is either going out of the stack, or in a better scenario, it's going to end up in either the fly ash or the FGD gypsum, into two different solid materials. It is not in any common plant going to end up in any liquid effluent at this stage. Next slide, please. So the mercury will either end up in the air, and the aim of Article 8 is to make sure that as little of it goes into the air as possible. It can then end up in the ash. Now, coal ash can be a valuable byproduct from coal combustion, and in fact in Europe it's sold at profit, and even countries such as India have a 100% fly ash utilisation goal. We want to use as much of that coal ash as we can for building materials, as we offset other sustainable non-sustainable sources of building materials. So it can be used as an aggregate, it can replace cement and concrete and so on. It can be used to make bricks, it can be used as backfill in roads. It's an ultimate use of the material where the mercury has been shown to be stable. It should not leach out of any of these materials under normal use. So if you're sitting in a house or a building made of cement and concrete, the mercury is stable in that wall. It's not going to come out. Obviously, there's ultimate end-of-life issues. If there's a fire, the building collapses, then the mercury could ultimately be released there, but that's not what we're planning for. In the normal situation, mercury is stable in cement and concrete. In the same way, gypsum, if it's absorbed in the gypsum from the FGD, it should be stable in there and it should not be released. So if you're sitting in a building with wallboard walls, which most of us are, there may well be mercury in that if it's gypsum from an FGD plant. Again, it's not going to leach out, it's not going to cause any air emissions to you. However, again, if the building burns down or something, then the mercury will ultimately be released, because that's where it goes. For the most part, people do not regard mercury in these solid wastes as an issue. Next slide, please. Forward. So in most plants, mercury will end up in that solid material. Very few plants will end up in any liquid, apart from ones we've just discovered quite recently. In this normal FGD process, where we're trying to capture as a priority the sulfur, we're capturing as a solid gypsum. There's an alternative process called a seawater FGD system, whereby instead of putting limestone through this wet FGD system, it just flushes through seawater. Next slide, please. So in this situation, you have a coal-fired power plant situated next to a bay or an estuary of the sea. Seawater is taken in from that area. It's flooded through this mist eliminator. It pulls down the sulfur, which gets washed back out to sea. And nobody minds, because there's a lot of sulfur in sea anyway. It's not causing any environmental damage as far as I'm aware. However, at the same time, this is going to be washing down the mercury. And that's exactly where we do not want the mercury to be, is being flushed out into any local seawater. Also, in a seawater FGD system, you have the aeration bases, which is this photograph down the bottom there. And that is open inside the plant. That's a bubbling flocculation tank to try and maximise the contact between the gases and the seawater material. And there is, as far as we're aware, a risk that there could be re-aeration of mercury in this local zone in this plant. So now we have new concerns that mercury may be released locally and may be being flushed out into the local seawater. Next slide, please. This has come up under a study we did in Indonesia. And as far as we can see, there's very little published on this. We've come across a paper from China, which says that seawater FGD systems are excellent for capturing sulfur and also excellent for capturing mercury. in that the mercury is not going into the air. If you look at towards the end there, it's reporting that sort of 57.8% at the bottom, 75.6% of the mercury is being captured in the seawater FGD system. But what it's not highlighting here is that capture is not ultimate capture. That is liquid capture that's being flushed out into the local estuary. So next slide, please. A couple of us have done literally back of the envelope calculations on this, which suggest that fairly large coal-fired power plant, 1200 megawatt coal-fired power plant, 10 kilotons of coal per day, could be releasing several hundreds of kilograms of mercury from that plant. And if the seawater FGD system is doing what we think it's doing, it's flushing that out into the local water. Back of the envelope calculations for the hundreds or so seawater plants around the world could mean almost 20 tons of mercury unaccounted for. It's not in the air anymore, so it's gone out of Article 9, but it's suddenly appearing under Article 10, and nobody has yet flagged that. And so we really want to flag that now. Next slide, please. So we're just looking at the data we possibly can, seeing where these seawater FGD plants are. Most of them are in emerging economies in Asia, a lot in China, but China is actually doing quite a lot to control their emissions, whereas these other regions are growing seawater FGD. These are island nations such as Indonesia, a lot of seawater to use. A seawater FGD system is more efficient for sulphur and it's cheaper. And so it's an obvious choice in these regions. And so we expect to see seawater use growing in these areas. And so it's very important that we flag now that this could be a mercury issue. Next slide, please. There's limited knowledge on mercury release from seawater FGD. There's very little information out there. If you have any, please send it to me immediately. What we want to do at this stage is to flag it as a potential concern. Next slide, please. And we have proposed a new project, which will be run under my new company that I now work for, EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute in America, where we want to look at information that's published. We want to go out to some of these plants in the emerging economies, confirm whether or not this mercury is going into the estuaries and the waters. Perhaps it isn't, perhaps we're panicking about nothing, but the mercury's not going nowhere. It's going somewhere and we need to work out where it is. We're working closely with the Fate and Transport Area, the BRI group, the Joseph Stefan Institute in Slovenia, and we are being gifted very kindly equipment from the US EPA on this project. And we received confirmation in the last week that this project has funding and will be going ahead. Now, rather than going in and just measuring and going away again, the ultimate aim of this project is to deliver training and capacity building. So we will be going in with our team for training for stack monitoring, coal and ash monitoring, water monitoring, local air quality in and around the plant, effluent monitoring, seawater monitoring, and the fish monitoring. So not only will we try and get measurements while we're there, but we will enable these regions to continue with this over time to see if there are any local increases in the mercury contamination in local waters. Hopefully there aren't, but if there are, we will also be offering technologies and techniques whereby they can reduce these emissions coming out in the effluent. Next slide, please. Just to point out that I used to work for the International Energy Agency's Clean Coal Centre, or the International Centre for Sustainable Carbon. It is closing next year, and so I've moved over to EPRI, as has a lot of the ICSE back catalogue. So we're hoping to take over a lot of the good work that that centre did and to continue to work on behalf of the Coal Partnership as we do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for very rich presentation, and thank you for reminding us that the coal is the second largest sources of emission of mercury emission to air after the artisanal small scale gold mining, and then it leads to the next presentation about non-ferrous metal production, which is under according to the Global Mercury Assessment, the third largest source of mercury emission to air. And as I said, there's a big challenge in estimating the releases to land and water. But I think we talked to the ICMM, International Council of Mining Metals, and Christian kindly agreed to make a technical presentation on the mercury release control measures in ferrous metals industry. So, Christine, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isaku, for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Kristen Powell. I'm Newmont's head of water and waste, and I'm here to provide an overview of mercury controls at Newmont. Next slide, please, and we can skip right through this one. Thank you. So I would just like to begin with a little bit of information about Newmont before I get into our controls. So next slide, please. Newmont is the world's leading gold company, and we're also a producer of copper, zinc, lead, and silver, so non-ferrous metals. We have a world-class portfolio of assets, of prospects, and of talent based in Africa, Australia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, North America, and also Papua New Guinea. So we have a very broad base. Next slide, please. We take pride in having a really long history of being a values-driven organization with a clear purpose that you can see at the bottom of this slide, which is to create value and improve lives through sustainable and responsible mining. And our core values shown here across the middle of the slide are really fundamental to how we run our business, where we choose to operate, and how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis. So Isaku mentioned that Newmont is a member of the International Council on Mining and Metals, or ICMM. And with that, we're aligned with the ICMM's Mercury Risk Management Position Statement. We detail our commitments more under our sustainability and stakeholder engagement policy. And that policy says that we do not use mercury to mine or to extract gold, although mercury is naturally present in ores at several of our operations. At those operations, mercury byproducts are recovered and they are permanently retired from circulation and not sold or given away. Our policy also acknowledges that artisanal and small-scale gold mining is responsible for significant releases of mercury into the global environment, and we're committed to support global initiatives to eliminate the use of mercury in this sector and to work with local entities to adopt mercury-free mining practices. Our policy is supported by a suite of environmental management standards, and mercury management is prescribed under 3 of those standards. They're all publicly available on our website if you're interested. They're the air emission standard, the water management standard, and the waste management standard. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I mentioned that mineralized forms of mercury exist naturally in ores at some of our operations. These operations are highlighted in yellow text on this slide, and they are Cripple Creek and Victor, or I'm going to call it CC&V through the rest of the presentation. That's located in Colorado in the United States of America. There's also Peñasquito in Mexico, Marion in Suriname, Yanacocha in Peru, and Cadia in Australia. Next slide, please. So during ore processing at these operations, I mentioned that mercury byproducts can be generated and that these are recovered following techniques and practices in line with the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Next slide, please. We can think of 3 kind of main groups of controls for primary gold production. These are controls for air releases, discussed in Article 8, controls for water releases, and also controls for waste management, which are discussed in Article 9. This image is actually adopted from the guidance on best available techniques and best environmental practices that was published by the convention in 2019. And I've gone through and I've marked up the elements of the flow sheet that are relevant to Newmont's operations. So first of all, we do not practice roasting, so that top right stream has been struck out. We do practice leaching with cyanide at 4 of the 5 operations, the exception being Cadia, where gravity gold is processed without cyanide leaching, so that's shown on the bottom left. At CC&V and Yanacocha, leaching is accomplished through heap leaching, so the middle left. And at Marion and Peñasquito, leaching occurs on processed slurries within processed plants. That's the top left. Peñasquito and Yanacocha practice zinc dust precipitation, which is also referred to as the Merrill-Crowe process, and CC&V and Marion practice electrowinning. So the sites that practice leaching have controls for air releases during stripping of gold from carbon and also from carbon regeneration, And then all sites have controls for air releases at retorts and smelting furnaces. One more thing to point out, which is that at Yanacocha, we have a net positive water balance in the heap leaching circuit, which means there's excess water that needs to be treated prior to discharge. And that treatment is a control for the water releases. And that's shown on the right-hand side of the figure. Next slide, please. So I won't spend too much time on air releases because that's not the focus of today's discussion, but I did want to just quickly touch on some of the controls that we have. So our carbon regeneration kilns, our retorts, and our furnaces all operate at very high temperatures, which can volatilize mercury that was remaining on stripped carbon or within gold sludges that are being treated. So these systems are all equipped with gas venting, scrubbers, and cooling systems, which serve to condense elemental mercury into fully contained industrial flasks, and also carbon columns to capture any residual mercury onto sulfur-impregnated activated carbon. And together, those controls for air releases achieve greater than 99% removal of mercury. Next slide, please. So for water releases, I mentioned that at Yanacocha, emissions to water are controlled with active treatment. And in this case, they're specifically precipitation and membrane separation. So if we follow along this flow sheet that I have here, after destruction of cyanide, a sulfide reagent or a polyorganosulfide reagent is added to precipitate mercury. Then a flocculant is added to promote agglomeration and settling of those precipitates within a clarifier. And clarifier overflow is polished in a membrane-based treatment process, first passing through ultrafiltration and then through reverse osmosis. The clarifier underflow, which consists of the precipitates, including the mercury, is pumped to an engineered containment structure that is constructed within an inactive heap leach facility. And drainage from that containment reports to the heap leach facility solution collection system. That heap leach facility is also aligned and has leak detection and recovery and a groundwater monitoring program. We do test the composition of the clarifier underflow, and we test its stability with elemental analysis and also with standardized stability tests such as TCLP and SPLP. So as a whole, this treatment system, again, is consistent with precipitation of metals and membrane filtration, which is in the guidance on best available techniques and best environmental practices that Eisaku was telling us about. It's also consistent with the Basel Convention, environmentally sound management practices, physicochemical treatment, and subsequent disposal in specially engineered landfills, in this case, the heap leach facility. Now, this treatment system achieves a very stringent limit for discharge to protect downstream beneficial uses of water. And in fact, monitoring shows that mercury concentrations are typically below method detection limits. Okay, next slide, please. Now we have several different kinds of mercury-containing waste streams, each of which is managed appropriately according to its characteristics. But this slide really focuses on elemental mercury that is captured in our air emissions controls. So we responsibly manage small volumes of captured elemental mercury within secured on-site storage areas prior to disposal. And we usually store this elemental mercury within the perimeter of our gold rooms because they have the highest security and the greatest access controls of all of the areas on our sites. In the United States of America, we comply with the mercury export ban, which means that we are safely storing elemental mercury on site at CCNV until a facility for permanent retirement is established by the US Department of Energy. Outside of the US, we work with a company called Batrec, which is a subsidiary of Veolia, and they support us with the safe physicochemical stabilization, transportation, and disposal of stabilized mercury in an underground salt mine in Germany. And you may recall Batrec's presentation from the March 2024 Minamata online webinar. We spend a lot of time focusing on establishing safe logistics for the transport of elemental mercury from our temporary safe storage sites to Batrec, and this includes having the appropriate personal protective equipment, packaging and labeling, route planning, convoys, fatigue management for vehicle drivers, emergency response plans and emergency response equipment, GPS tracking of vehicles, and then making sure that the ports of export have secure staging areas as well. Next slide, please. So artisanal and small scale mining exists in close proximity to several of our operations in Ghana, in Suriname, and Peru, and presents safety, security, environmental, and social challenges. And Newmont's approach to artisanal and small scale mining includes partnering with small scale miners to improve safety, processing, and environmental outcomes, as well as providing alternative livelihood opportunities. So just as one example, at our Suriname operation, we've signed a cooperation agreement with indigenous small-scale gold miners, which includes elements focused on environmental control. So promoting techniques that discontinue the use of mercury while improving gold recovery and reducing costs, providing assistance to acquire the equipment that's needed for those techniques, and also providing technical advice, focusing on things like reducing sediment load, restoring waterways, and revegetating areas that have been disturbed by artisanal and small-scale gold mining practices. So I think I'll leave it there in the interest of time. It was a very quick overview, but I hope it gives you some flavor of the suite of environmental controls that we employ at Newmont and our mercury management practices. So thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Christian, for also another very rich presentation, and also mentioning the other articles such as the Mercury Waste Article 11 and SGM Article 7, and I really hope that the presented information is very useful for the sector, especially the industry in developing countries and economies, and the countries in economies in transition. So I think we have 5 minutes for Q&A. Sorry for a bit for time control, but I think the presentations were very beneficial. And as I looked at the chat, I think the question from David Hunter was already responded by Leslie, so I think it is okay now. So I don't think there's any pending question in the chat. So I think we have 4 minutes. Very fortunately, we have some time for oral questions. So if any of the participants have any oral question, or of course the panelists are very welcome to ask questions. If you have any question, please raise your hand. Yes, Natalia. I think Natalia. I think you can mute yourself, or your hand was not up, maybe. If you wish to speak, can you raise your hand again? Oh, I think I sent a request to unmute, but yes.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
Good day. Thank you for very interesting and rich presentations. I have a question to Christine with regards to management of mercury waste and your experience in working with Batrec and another company. You said that another one was assisting you in stabilizing liquid mercury and then storing it or exporting it, or because we have my name is Natalia Fros. I'm sorry, from the Republic of Moldova. We have some mercury waste as liquid one. It is originating from confiscated mercury from thermometers and other sources, but it is liquid one. So do we need to call a company, come in our country and stabilize it, and after that export it, or it can be exported as liquid one? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Natalia. So the arrangement that we have with Batrec is that we export liquid elemental mercury in the industrial flasks in their packaging that allows for the safe export of that as a liquid. And from there, Batrec takes care of the stabilization process to convert the mercury to essentially cinnabar, and then takes care of the disposal process in the underground salt mine as well. So we do export as liquid elemental mercury.
And the company was responsible for the packaging to export it and for all the arrangements.
So Newmont is responsible for the packaging and the domestic logistics to the port of export. And Batrec does essentially all of the other elements of the contract from the port of export.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine and Natalia. And I have, so Dave Hunter, I think you may have a question, and also you may be able to respond to to Natalia's questions if you wish. Dave, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Hi there. And yeah, just quickly to answer Natalia first. Yep, exactly as Kristen had said, we can export mercury either as liquid mercury, or if it's in thermometers or whatnot, it can be correctly packaged in the country and then exported to Batrec or a company like Batrec, where the mercury can be separated from the waste and stabilized and sent to the salt mine in Germany. But we can maybe discuss that in more detail later if you wish. I actually had a question for Kristen. Yep, thanks for the shout out as well. And we've been working together for a very long time. And really I had a question. You talked a little bit of the mercury wastes coming from the gold processing, but not from copper. And I wondered if there are separate waste streams or any, what are the waste streams really coming from copper mining, or is that all integral to the gold mining process? If you could speak a little bit to that, it would be very interesting for me. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Dave. So the mercury waste that we're managing are predominantly from our gold recovery process streams. Our copper concentrate, in some cases, contains minor amounts of mercury, and that concentrate is processed downstream in the value chain by others, and they have mercury emissions controls within those processes.
Thank you, Christine. I think your response was good for Dave. And so last question or comment from Bianca, and perhaps I may invite you to to provide a closing remark if you wish, as co-chair of the expert group. Bianca.
Thank you very much, Saku, and thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, Leslie and Christine, for very rich presentation on your work. I have two questions before we close. One for Christine, maybe to thank her very much on the part on the industry best practice on engaging the ASGM sector in trying to eliminate mercury use. Maybe, Christine, maybe you could share more or share privately the information that you have on how you engage with the ASGM sector, especially because we are also doing projects that are trying to eliminate mercury. Maybe we could learn on how industry and the ASGM can engage in the same course of action. And then also one question to Leslie. I saw in your presentation that you are intending to do a project in Vietnam, I don't remember the other country. I just wanted to find out if you have any intention of doing a similar project with Africa, because I think it may benefit the region as well to be part of that project. Those are my questions, and maybe coming back to what Saku asked me to do, may I thank everyone here for the presentations, for the work, and thank you for support throughout my journey as co-chair of the group on releases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bianca, and so sorry for extending the time a little bit, but I propose that we invite Leslie and Christian to respond to the question and also provide a closing word.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No,
Thank you.
no. So just Leslie and Christian, and I will close. So Leslie.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for the question, Bianca. Yes, the funding is for work in Indonesia and Vietnam, as these countries have a high amount of seawater FGD, which is what we're interested in. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any seawater FGD systems in Africa right now, but you're right, there's a huge potential to do work down there. We have done some preliminary work on inventories with Eskom in South Africa, and we're hoping that we can work with them on developing strategies to maximize co-benefit reduction of mercury. But yes, if you have a project, if you want to work together on a project in Africa, I'm there. Just give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Christian.
And then Bianca, I'll respond at a very high level. Happy to have follow-up discussions on the work that we're doing in this space, working with artisanal and small-scale gold miners. Specifically in Suriname, we're working with an international civil society organization called Solidaridad Latin America. And we're working with them to develop a concept for a pilot plant that doesn't use mercury and that could actually increase gold recovery. So it has a very strong business case for investment by the artisanal and small-scale gold miners. Each project that we do is context specific, it's site specific, and it really looks at focusing the work and the partnerships to the needs of the specific communities. So I can't answer more broadly than that. But yeah, happy to have follow-up discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Bianca. And I think we have to close now. And Bianca's question about the involvement of the metals industry in ASGM is very important. We have we have conversation with the ICMM on of course on the Minamata Convention itself, but also UNEP, UNEA took UNEA decision on the metal mining and metals, and we have a broad contact on these issues. So I think this today's conversation reminded me about the further need to link the industrial gold production and artisanal scale and ASGM. So thank you very much, and sorry again for extending 7 minutes, but I hope that this session was useful to you. So have a good rest of the day, and thank you. Goodbye.